Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel Clark for Wuxia Workshop. And today we're going to be talking about the movies Painted Skin and Killer Klans. I basically had Joel watch these two movies. He had two very different reactions to them, and he's gonna let us know what he thinks about the films, and then we're going to talk about them in the context of gaming. So Joel. I'm going to open with Painted Skin, and we did Painted Skin Resurrection, so just to be clear, this is not the first Painted Skin movie, nor is it the original King Hu movie or the one from the 60s. This is the 2012 sequel to the 2008 Painted Skin. And this one, has a pretty good cast, a lot of people from the 2008 movie, and it continues following the Painted Skin demon from the original movie, except she's more of a fox demon in this one. So, Joel, what did you think of the film? Let's start there.
No, sir, I didn't like it. I really didn't. I wanted to, because I came into it kind of with this attitude where I wasn't sure what to expect. Like, Painted Skin, the short story is a horror story. And, this immediately, leans on the fox demon thing. And I was like, well, this is going to be an interesting take. And actually, little factoid, David Ramirez, the guy I work with on Tiancheng, he wrote a story about a fox demon, fairly recently. He's going to turn it into a little comic book. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this is one of the things that inspired him, because, he and I, kind of swim in the same circles with that stuff. So I didn't know what to think of it, and I got to watching it, and it was one of those movies where about halfway through I had to take a break. Oh, yeah, he did. Go play. Go play, okay, but I'm in the middle of my recording thing. As usual, I have my son with me today, so there'll be some occasional interruptions from babies. But I had to give myself a self-imposed little, what do you call it, an intermission, because I was just like, okay, I've yet to find anything I can latch onto in this movie that I'm actually enjoying. And, I don't want to, poo-poo the movie, because it's not like it's bad. This is what's frustrating me about the movie. It's not bad. It's not badly paced. It's not badly written. It's not badly acted. The acting is actually really good. And as a matter of fact, very early into the movie, I had high hopes for it, because the fox demon comes across the princess, and she's this super badass, fighting bad guys and doing cool stuff. I know the moment the movie lost me is fox demon finds out the warriors of the princess, and she gets stung right in the tit by the scorpion and clearly dies. She falls over and dies, or I thought she died. And then the next scene starts and she's fine, and there's no explanation for how she got better or the intervening time or anything. And that's one of the 8 times that chick dies in this movie, and they're just oh, but she's fine.
Okay, see, I didn't interpret that as her dying.
I
have to confess, I don't know enough about scorpions to know how venomous that would be to a human. But I assumed that she just got really hurt, and then she got knocked out and woke up. But go on, I'm sorry.
I assume that's what happened. That's what the movie was trying to carry forth. And maybe in China, everybody knows about how poisonous scorpions are. And that would actually make a lot of sense. I'm sure that's one of those homeopathic remedies. China's really big in China, is that kind of medicine. But man, I had no
read
on that. And I don't know, it just kind of, I wasn't really able to follow the characters. Okay, so they set up a very, very standard love triangle that is it's perfectly serviceable, between, it turns out the princess got her face mauled by a bear, and, the guy she was in love with was, this guard that was a really badass archer that was supposed to be protecting her, and he fucked up, and he felt really upset about it. And, the rub of the story is that she thinks he doesn't like her because her face is all scarred up, but he actually doesn't give a crap. What he cares about is that he failed her, and that shame just makes him so unhappy when he's around her. He's like, I failed you, princess. So the fox demon, interprets that the same way, and she, tempts the girl with these shape-changing powers that make her beautiful, and, she curses the one guy with her fox magic to kind of, have the hots for her. And, I don't know, it had a real Romeo and Juliet vibe, so, it was well constructed, but I don't have a lot of patience for the Romeo and Juliet stuff, because, for me, that Romeo and Juliet and, this is a flaw in me from like looking at a story like Romeo and Juliet and being like frustrated with it. For me, my whole job is communicating well. So for me, Romeo and Juliet is a story about two people who weren't patient enough to communicate effectively, and everything got fucked up as a result. So in a lot of ways, like, I think that I was bringing that frustration into Painted Skin too.
That's interesting.
Maybe that was hurting for me.
Well, no, that's interesting because it sounds like what turns you off was the love story element. It sort of shifts in the direction of a love story, and specifically into one where it's all about the miscommunication leading to tragedy, which you will find a lot of in this kind of film.
Any romance. That's every romance. That's the thing.
And that's the thing I like about the movie, but I can totally see, number one, how it wouldn't be appealing to a lot of people, but number two, how it does kind of throw you a curveball, because the beginning of the movie, it feels like it's a supernatural adventure filled with action, and then suddenly it shifts, and there's still supernatural, there's still action, but so much of the attention is drawn to characters talking on the beach, and characters be, and
you
people
off the beach, and then you get rescued from the beach, and then you talk about it some more. Then you're in a pool, and you're right. It's not just that the tone changes. The tone doesn't actually change that much. What changes is the pacing. The pacing goes from we're on horseback, we're fighting demons, to let's talk about it for the rest of the movie.
Yeah,
I don't actually know how to play this game. Well, this is Yoshi's Woolly World. You can do it though. You have to figure it's a puzzle. You have to figure that one out. Anyway. Off you go. I gotta do my thing. Sorry, buddy. I can't fix that one for you. First of all, I don't know how to play Yoshi's Woolly World, and second of all, I got my thing I'm doing. So it's two things.
And so, but yeah, no, I think the pacing definitely changes. But again, that's what's interesting to me. There is one of the things I like about this movie is the pacing, because I enjoy sort of the way that I'm getting to see all of the different characters. Like, you have these different relationships that are being dealt with, and it's spending time on them. And so you have like you have her sister, the bird demon, who's dealing with the demon hunter, and they have like a cute little relationship. And then you have her whole love triangle.
Where, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Did that subplot wind up going anywhere? They actually they spent a lot of time on like the kind of crummy demon hunter and the bird demon, and like their relationship and everything, and like that didn't seem to go anywhere.
Well, it sort of was like it kind of went somewhere, but it was much lower key than what was going on with the other characters. So their whole thing was he eventually, he admits to her that he really wants to be a demon, which is the big joke about that character. He's a demon hunter who wants to be a demon. I saw that as I thought that was kind of like a reference to Chinese ghost story, where the demon hunter has similar sets of confusions at a certain point in the movie. But it was just kind of like it was kind of like a sweet little love story between them, and just when they're getting to the point where it seems like they might, and I'm going to spoil the ending of the film for people, just when it gets to the point where it seems like they're going to have some kind of relationship after the climax of the film, she gets destroyed by his blood, because his blood can kill demons. And we learn that she's like a phoenix demon, and the whole question that was being asked about her in their she went to him trying to find out what kind of demon she was. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was trying to find out more about herself, and so I don't know. I feel like it was kind of nicely tied up at the end. I don't know if it went anywhere in the same way that the main characters went, but to me it was a satisfying, ending for them. But I don't know if that, again, it might not have been what you were looking for.
The opposite effect, because like I really felt like there was more to do with both of those characters, and their ending just kind of puttered out, and we're like, we're done messing with that now.
Okay.
I mean, like, and again, maybe I was just missing the cultural boat, because I was like, I'm not getting what you're saying about the Phoenix demon. As far as I was figuring out, like, she was just dying because of his blood, and that was it. Like, I didn't realize there was some Phoenix thing going on there. Maybe I just missed the boat.
So remember, it destroys her flesh, and she emerges as it looks like a Chinese phoenix when she emerges. And, and there's a really important exchange between them where he has I'm sorry?
I thought the phoenix was Chinese. Is that not Chinese? Is that not
Oh no,
Isn't that
no,
a
but there's
Phoenix?
there's the like the Western Phoenix, and then there's like the Chinese Phoenix. They're two different mythological creatures.
I
So
didn't know. Is that like the Chiron versus the unicorn kind of?
yeah, yeah,
So
it's an
okay.
action. It's a different. I mean,
I
Phoenix
didn't
is
know
a,
that.
but she looks like a Chinese Phoenix when her flesh falls off. And there was a scene earlier where he has this book of all the different demons, and she's like, "Well, where am I in that book?" And he can't find her. And he's like, "Oh, maybe you're an amateur, or maybe you're not really
Maybe
a
you
demon."
suck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe and so their whole relationship is kind of built on that exchange. And so I like that the surprise is that she, because he mentions when he's going through the book, he mentions Phoenix Spirit. So so I feel like there's a lot of little details, because I kind of had a similar thing where I thought they were just kind of a cute sideshow the first time I saw the movie, but every time I watch it since then, I find that the details sort of pop out at me more, and that there's a lot more to chew on with that relationship. So, but again, I mean, if it didn't work for you, it didn't work for you.
And this conversation, unfortunately, is not giving me a better opinion of the movie, because that is a really cool detail. But like, I don't know, it just wasn't. I guess maybe I didn't find that very satisfying.
Now, what about in terms of gaming content? Was there anything in this movie that you felt that you could?
All right. Yeah, I mean, like, in the end of the movie, they've got that awesome heavy metal demon ceremony where they're trying to bring the guy back from the dead. That's bringing people back from the dead should always be radical and metal, and like, I'm just gonna probably just steal that whole scene.
It was very metal. It was very Temple of Doom, I thought.
It was metal. It was very Temple of Doom. Yes, it's very accurate. Actually, the guy they got, the head priest, was he like Caucasian or part Caucasian?
No,
he did not look.
He's.
What else
I think I don't know for sure. I think he's half Chinese, but he's like a Cantonese pop star. He's actually very famous. That guy. And so it wasn't like because a lot of times in these movies they do just kind of they'll hire I don't know how it works over there, but you'll get people who are not necessarily the greatest actors in the world who are playing the Westerner, and this guy, he was doing a good job in that role, I thought.
Yeah, he was great. He really stole the show.
And also the way that those scenes were done, there were a lot of interesting. I don't know. I found that the rhythm of some of the dialogue when the princess of that kingdom was talking was in sync with the music behind it on the soundtrack, and it was very effective. So which I think just ties more into the metal stuff, But that also sticks out like a sore thumb in the movie because it's so different from everything else in it. So
yeah, nothing else was like that. I mean, like, I will grant, like, whenever we switch over to the dead barbarian princess stuff, it all kind of has this sort of heavy metal vibe to it. But that scene's the only one where it just opens up and it's like, time to rock, boys and girls. So like, that was really cool. Showing my love for heavy metal here. What else? Okay, so charm person is a thing that's hard to carry off in a game, and I think that this movie does a pretty good job of showing it as like more of like kind of a curse, where like you don't really, the way you react whenever you're charmed by a fox demon or some such thing, that can manifest in weird ways what happens to the player characters. I think whenever like you have a character, an NPC to an NPC or a player to an NPC where they're charming a bad guy, it's pretty easy for you as the GM to be like, oh, okay, they like you and they're nice to you. Mm-hmm. But whenever that magic hits the player character, the question of character and player agency comes up. And I think that was a really good, like, that movie did a pretty good job of showing that it's kind of a carrot and a stick scenario where if they don't play along, there should be some kind of soft punishment. And if they do play along, there should be like a soft reward. Yeah. That kind of incentivizes them towards it without necessarily beating them over the head with the inability to role play.
The flavor was good too. The way that they sort of focused it on the eyes, and that was sort of the out. Like, if you want to get out of this curse, you slice your eyes open. And
as soon as he cut his eyes off, I was like, that reminds me of Brendan. Some shit that you would put in a game.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I mean, obviously, my opinion of the movie is very different than yours, and so I borrowed a lot from this film, and I don't think I borrowed that, but the way that they handled the fox spirit, I definitely borrowed. Like, this is a movie that if you see this movie, you will understand a lot of what I was going for with how in my campaigns with how I handled fox spirits, but because I just think it's so the way that she pulls out people's hearts like that is
she's super casual about it, which is what's kind of chilling about that, where she's just like, I'll take your heart too. Nom, 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 nom. It's like an apple to me. Like, the movie doesn't even bat its eye. It starts you off with her tearing people's hearts out. It's just like, holy
absolutely.
God.
Now, what did you think of that coming back to haunt her at the end? How did you feel about that plot beat? Was that cheap or was that good in your opinion?
No, it was well structured, but I'll tell you, it actually kind of ruined the Barbarian Prince's badass super metal resurrection, because I know he's a wimp. Now, like, he went down in the opening prologue of the movie without a fight. My heart dead. Yeah. And, like, the Sparrow Demons, like, she doesn't even pause in her dialogue. It's like, yeah, whatever, I'm nom nom nom. So, the guy's a wuss, so it's not like Sauron's coming back. It's just some dude. Hey, I'm back, guys. Woo, thanks for the medal ceremony.
Yeah. I think the thing about that scene that makes it work is that that she loses her powers by the time she gets there. So she has no ability to stave off even the most, even like the guards of the princess. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting that one thing I want to know about is would you like some of the stuff in this that I would try to emulate in a lot of my games is the love story elements, but I'm wondering, is that something that you would find difficult in a campaign to draw in?
Let me think. I'm trying to think if I ever had a love story in a campaign. I mean, like, usually, like, whenever I have a love story, it has about the same kind of impact on the game that, like, you might have with a favored hireling. It's just not, like, it's not a Romeo and Juliet thing where it's, like, the whole reason a character does stuff. It's another thing about them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I could make a central love story compelling. Okay. Because for me, like, the central story in almost every role-playing game revolves around the reason for adventuring. Going to the dungeon, get loot, or, like, there's a big bad guy, you've got to fight him, something like that. It's more about the acquisition of power or wealth. And, like, I don't want to, like, cheapen a love story by making that a central part of it. So, like, I don't know. I'm not sure how I would make that a compelling thing. In Tiansheng, what I'd probably do is give you give you a dharma. And, like, that would be your dharma. Like, your destiny is to seek your true love or whatever.
Okay.
And I guess maybe you could carry it off kind of like the Princess Bride, sort of. Okay. Like, that was one where, like you were compelled to adventure for your love. So, probably the best version of that would be Princess Bride, as far as, like, the best version I've ever seen as far as, like, an adventuring thing based on true love. Because there's not a whole lot of times when true love as a motivator... I mean, like, that has an end point. You get together, and then you have a little house. Yeah. So, like, once you get to that little house point, it sort of feel like your adventuring career's over.
Oh, I get you. Okay, see, what I would tend to do is I would tend to keep going and have, like, okay, well, they're eventually going to have kids, and, then that becomes... I see those things as stuff that roots the players to the setting more, but it doesn't necessarily end their adventuring career.
I've had characters that had kids that, like, get married, have kids, and they still go on adventure, and, like, I don't know, like, it's never been a thing where, like, it's
not the focus. It's not.
Yeah, it's always, like, very much a secondary, tertiary thing at best.
So,
actually, one of the things that I wanted to point out that I would put in a game is that awesome-ass acid demon blood that the holy guy had. He's like, I'm totally holy. Look at my blood, and it's like burning people. That's great.
Yeah. His blood is basically like from the movie Aliens, except it only affects demons. And
love that.
And it's because of his bloodline. I think the implication is he's a descendant of the demon hunters from the first movie, but I'd have to watch the first movie again to really determine that.
Yeah, I rented it on Amazon Prime, which is actually a really good way to watch these movies, because you're out like $3-4 and you need to have this really fun little movie. And in this case, like, I didn't really enjoy this movie, but, like, it was $4. I was like gonna buy for $4 a sandwich.
And I will say thank you for watching the whole movie, even though you didn't like it, because that was it's a little bit long, if I remember. Yeah,
it was worth it to get to that awesome ass scene in the end. Like that, and actually the fight scene at the end was great. All the fight scenes in the movie were really good. I love those.
Yeah, the fight scenes are spectacular. I don't think I've ever heard anybody complain about the fight scenes. They're not necessarily, like, it's one of these movies where it doesn't even really matter if the actors are really doing it or not. It's the way that it's done that it just
Yeah,
looks
it's well
awesome.
directed.
Yeah, and I think the fight scenes are great. I also like the music and just the overall feel and look of the movie. It has this really cool sort of blue filtered look to it that to me just is visually interesting. But the music is one of the things that really pulls me into it.
It's got a nice score. I remember that thing.
Yeah, well, a lot of these films, I feel like they're pretty attentive to the music. But all right, so with that one out of the way, the one you didn't like out of the way, we should talk now about Killer Klans. This one, it seemed like you had a slightly better reaction to this one, though.
I really enjoyed Killer Klans. Like you compared it to The Godfather, and like because I wasn't sure what to make of the pacing, because like a lot of the older like kung fu movies, its pacing is breakneck. Like it doesn't spend any time on like ponderously setting stuff up, which surprised me about Painted Skin. But like in Killer Klans, it's like, bam, this guy's dead, deal with it. It sucks to be a killer because your career ends in death. Oh man, a trap. Now these guys are dead. But yeah, whenever you compare that to even the pacing of a very Western movie like The Godfather, like The Godfather does very similar stuff. It doesn't spend a lot of time setting up, and like you wind up getting these really important named characters just completely killed, like in really early, like startlingly early scenes. I kind of compare it to the effect that like Psycho had, where like you have like this movie and you're like, oh, it's going to be like this, and they're going to have these character arcs, and these guys are the badasses, so they're going to be in these last fight scenes. Nope, they're dead. They died today, now.
I mean,
so
it's all in the title. It's all in the title. So just so people that are listening know, I talk about Killer Klans all the time. Obviously, it's one of them. It's probably got the biggest influence on the stuff I do gaming wise than any movie, and it's based on a Gulong story called Meteor Butterfly Sword. There's also a movie from the 90s with Michelle Yeoh that's based on the same source material. There's only a partial translation available as far as I know if you want to get it in English, so you can read like the first 9 chapters, and that will explain some of what's going on. And you'll also, if you go to like SBCnet, you'll get to see a lot of the comments about the Godfather where people are actually doing comparisons. But
I could see the comparison, yeah.
Well, it's not just the movie; it's the book too. Because I read the Godfather years ago, but like there are strong similarities, right down to like the guy whose daughter gets raped going to in this case he's uncle rather than the Godfather, but going to uncle and asking for help getting revenge, down to uncle's son being killed. And in the book, his son even has a personality that's almost exactly like Sonny from the Godfather.
Yeah.
And there's I think what's the character's name? Han Tong. He's basically Luca Brasi. There's all these things that are really close to the Godfather. But what I like about it is, number one, you get the sense that Gulong was obviously, he was either watching the movie or reading the book or something, and it seems to have influenced his writing of the story. And it shows you how there's a lot of times when we talk about these films, we debate, is it wuxia and what is wuxia? And I kind of like films that challenge that sort of challenge the definition of the genre that they belong to a little bit, because it helps them grow. And I feel like once we sort of settle, like, no, this is like a standard definition might really focus on martial heroes using their power to protect the weak. That's a really simple aspect of wuxia that people will often focus on, and that's definitely wuxia. But in this movie, you don't really have that. Like there's trace elements of it, but even like the hero is an assassin, and I don't think at any point we really see him helping the weak, or
like he gets the weak killed a lot. Like, remember, and I'm gonna go like way deep into spoiler territory. Whenever Uncle escapes the one of the many assassination plots to kill the unkillable Uncle, and he goes to that guy's house that he saved from prison, and the guy's like, "Oh, the kids saw him. Well, feed them this poison." And you're just like I watched that scene and I was like, this is such a Godfather scene. Yeah. This is some shit you would see in a Francis Ford Coppola movie. I'm stunned.
Well,
so yeah, that's no one saved those kids. Those kids are toast.
Well, what it does too is it kind of, I mean, there is sort of a tremendous crossover between gangster movies and wuxia films, and because you get into that sort of Jianghu underworld, and you meet a lot of characters that you might see in a gangster movie with similar codes of honor. And I feel like that's one of the things that Gulong is very good at, is focusing on those types of characters. Even the heroes, like not all of his heroes are as morally questionable as this one. You know, a lot like most of them are actually pretty, you know, more typical wuxia heroes. But in this movie, at least in this movie version of the story, you know, there's, I mean, everybody's dirty. Everybody's dirty, and it does not flinch away from the dirtiness of the martial world. You know, like and I find it I find it a much more interesting setting to play around with than a setting where the characters are all heroic and the morality is very clear.
Yeah, and because this allows, I think that people have this unfortunate tendency when they're at the gaming table to kind of proselytize about, oh, this is lawful good, but that's not good, that kind of thing. And like that sort of armchair philosophy is extremely frustrating because it doesn't take into account the actual like moral complexities of actual situations you might run into in this kind of scenario. And this movie doesn't allow you that kind of armchair comfort. It really does sit you down and say, hey, look, life is complex, man, and you got to live your life by your own code because at any point it could end hideously for you. So yeah, that's something I admired about that, and that's something that's very gameable about this movie. Hey, Roland, I'm still doing my talking, buddy.
And was there anything that you didn't like about this movie, or was it one that?
As a parent, it's hard to watch the kid poisoning scene.
Okay,
because it's like it's their parents poisoning them. It's not even a bad guy.
Yeah,
it's just they're betraying their trust, which is. I wanted to punch that fat fuck in the face. I'm like, you son of a...
Oh, yeah. That guy is in, like, every Shaw Brothers movie, by the way. He is he is just one of those people that's, like, a steady character actor. But the woman that plays the mother, that's Teresa Ha Ping, she plays the... In this, you didn't really see it, but she plays really good, eccentric characters. And they have her play all kinds of different roles. But that scene, to me, that was the most shocking in the movie. It was the scene, but it's also the scene that kind of sells the movie. It sort of fully commits to the. That's where like the theme of the movie kind of is like, this is the world that the characters are living
Yeah,
in.
it's the thing. Like, it's such an important scene that I would never take it out in a million years, but I hate it. It's kind of like the final scene in The Mist. You ever seen the movie The Mist? Like, the final scene is just such a ball buster of a scene. But the rest of the movie doesn't work unless you have that scene in there, because that scene is like the whole thesis of the movie is right there in that very important scene. So like I hate it, and I hate that it's necessary, but like it's got to stay in. Well, everything else was just a joyride for me. I love this movie.
And the thing that makes that scene really difficult, I think, is the fact that the kids clearly have no idea. Like they're enjoying the food, and it's like you feel bad watching the scene.
Oh yeah. But I mean, that's the movie saying, hey, look, I know you want this naive good guy stuff. We're literally killing that in front of you for a reason.
Yeah.
Because you can't have that in this movie. That's not what this movie is about. This movie is about morally complex adults. So these are the only kid characters that have showed up in the movie. They're toast. The reason they're toast is because you have to let go of that for this movie.
Yeah, because basically, the three most morally good characters in the movie, aside from, well, we'll take the couple out of the equation just because theirs is such a complicated situation. But Meng, the main character, the daughter of Uncle and Uncle himself are kind of they're the best that's offered. Maybe what's his name? Ye Sung, the drunken assassin who's down on his luck.
Like, I guess so, but he doesn't do much. You know, like he is only noble by dint of the fact he doesn't do anything more awful than he does. You know, and I don't know if that counts. I don't know if that'll reach muster in this movie. But like, and here's the thing about this movie: it never lets you forget that those who Uncle wants to die deserve to die. Like that's its. This movie had a tagline, that would be the tagline, because he's as close to a moral person as this movie will let you get.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with a morally like imperfect being the moral center of the universe. That actually makes it really good. You know, and I liked Uncle. I loved his escape route. Like, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, I am sold on this. That is gonna happen in a game.
So this is the thing that is really cool about this movie. The leader of the Lung Men Society, Uncle, played by Ku Feng, who's again another great actor in these movies.
That guy's a really good actor in this movie. He nailed his part.
Yeah, and he can play so many different kinds of roles. Like you see him playing, like he's just got versatility. But in this film he plays Uncle, who's like that's his nickname in the book. His nickname translates to like old uncle or something like that. And so he's sort of a stand-in for the Godfather, but he has plots within plots and plans within plans, and he's thought of every contingency plan imaginable, and he even like allows himself to get into that dangerous situation just so he can expose the person in his organization that is plotting against him. And it's exactly how you should. If you have an NPC who is an evil mastermind, this guy is a masterclass in how to engineer that and make it work. Oh, go ahead. It looks like you want to say something.
Nope, I have a cat.
Oh, okay.
The cat keeps coming right by my microphone, and I'm like, stop doing that, you dumb animal. I keep tossing her down unceremoniously into the ground, and she's just like, I'm gonna do it again. Look, here she comes. Dear God.
But he number one, he wears a vest that's impervious to projectiles, so he's only exposed at certain times. But when the guy who betrays him gets him into his chamber, he pulls a switch and there's his bed drops and it brings him into a section below the fortress, and then that's when he gets to the couple who have his whole escape route planned for him. And then even beyond that, he still has all these chess pieces in place that he can draw on. It's just staggeringly good.
It is, and what's great about this movie is that it does a thing that I really admire. Any story that does this, where it will completely exhaust a premise. So you've got Uncle, and like you mentioned, he has a cloak that's impervious to weapons, and he's got all these elaborate tricks and escape routes and all this stuff, and he gets away with it. And then the guy that's like his adversary does almost exactly like beat for beat the same stuff, and he fails. So you get to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
You get to have both. You get to have the guy that's basically unbeatable. Then you get to have that same guy and beat him in the same movie.
But do you know why that guy? There's a reason that guy doesn't succeed. Because he doesn't have any real friends the way that Uncle does. Because Uncle's also doing all these good things for people. Do you know what I mean?
Uncle, the loyalty Uncle inspires is very genuine.
Yeah.
Like, he really knows how to get people in his wheelhouse.
And so I don't necessarily, I don't want to, I mean, we spoiled a lot already, but I don't want to spoil the final scene. But the way that they deal with the villain at the end of it is wonderful. It's a really clever. It took me by surprise the first time I saw it, and they even distract you so that you just don't see it coming. You think it's an impossibility by the time it happens.
Yeah, there's a lot to admire there, and we're even talking about way deep into the movie. The movie's good from the beginning. Like I said, a shockingly early scene, they introduce this really super awesome badass, and the tagline for this guy is, if you want to get to Uncle, you have to kill this guy. He lives alone in the woods. Yep. No one knows where he lives, and he's just this super badass. And you don't even get to see him kill anyone before they found a way to assassinate him. Again, shockingly early, they Luca Brasi that guy.
And you know who played him? That's Lo Lieh, who played the character that you liked from Budapest, from Eastern Island.
That was the same guy, wasn't it?
Yep.
I like to think it's the same character.
maybe.
This was his retirement.
I guess in an alternate timeline, it could be the same guy. But this guy is much more severe. This guy is definitely Luca Brasi ported into the martial world. He's that kind of a character.
Same beats Luca Brasi too, where they set him up as super loyal, super important right-hand man, and just a complete badass, and then bam, they immediately kill that guy.
What's also funny is in the book, or in one of the early chapters, the way that he is handled is exactly the way he's handled in The Godfather, which is he makes even the Godfather uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if you remember that from the movie. I don't know how clear it was in that. But in the original Godfather movie, Marlon Brando's character is meant to be uncomfortable in the presence of Luca Brasi because he's this... I don't recall exactly why, but I feel like he is this just almost like an elemental force in the story that only the Godfather is able to harness somehow, but even he feels uncomfortable in his presence. And you get a very similar type of thing going on between Uncle and that character in the story.
Yeah, seemed a little nervous about the guy. He's like, yeah, if you want to kill me, you have to kill him, but I feel weird about having him on the payroll.
But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you would gain from this? Is there any?
And there's so much. Like, okay, so here's the thing that's hard to do in a game that happens like several times in this movie, which is the your characters are in the place where they're gonna like they're talking to the main bad guy or whatever. They're like, oh, we got a plot to kill him. We got this clever plot, and then just like all the panels slide over and like an army of like mooks come out. And then there's a giant proper combat.
Yep.
That happens like 7 times in this movie. Like that is Uncle's move. He's like, oh, you thought I was alone? Well, I have an entire army. Wow, you really do. That's a whole army. They're right in this room. And they've done that in some of the other movies we've watched too. And I think that's because you want to give these big elaborate fight scenes where you got your hero scything through minions. But like that's really hard to pull off in a way that's like that feels genuine at the table. It always whenever I'm a player, a lot of times you can kind of see the invisible puppet strings of the GM going, "Oh hell, I didn't prep anything here," and they just kind of throw some NPCs in there. But this movie carried it off really well, and I think that you could probably learn something. Like there's probably a lesson to be learned.
There's a way to do that. There's a way to do that because I've done it. And the way to do it is to not do it on the fly and to make sure that when you, like, say, for example, you're mapping out Uncle's fortress. You want to plan for him having that kind of a thing in place before it actually happens in the game so that all the pieces that explain its existence are there. Do you know what I mean? So that you know where these guys are coming from. In the movie, they can have them come from anywhere because it's a movie. But in the game, you sort of need to have the geography fleshed out a little bit. And so, like, just as an example, I had an underground cave dwelling situation where the players were exploring in one of my games. And I ended up in this room where it's something quite similar to that, except there are all these panels that open up. It's like a trap chamber, and a bunch of guys with arrows just come out and start firing at them. And what I did was I had like the little stations that the guys were all sitting at beyond those chambers planned out. And I had the areas that lead away from those chambers planned out. And so I also roughly knew what the patrol system was. Like, okay, they'll always have 8 guys in here, and they take it in shifts, so there can always be 8 guys. And that way, if the players did anything in their early exploration, they had a legitimate chance of finding this defense system. And when they actually explored the defense system after it was triggered, they could see evidence that it had been laid down in advance. And so I think that's the way to do it.
The way to do it is to actually pull it off.
Yeah. Well, to actually, so when you're playing Uncle in a campaign, before the session happens, you need to go through Uncle's contingency plans in advance and make sure that you have all the
sense,
because otherwise you're just pulling it out of the air, and that's when it will feel cheap. I think if players can sense, oh, he just threw in 100 guys because he wanted to have 100 guys show up all of a sudden. You know, it feels very ethereal, like they just materialized out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it hurts the verisimilitude of your campaign quite a bit, and like that's what I think you're right. I think that whenever you are actually lying, that's whenever you're caught in the lie. But if you planned it out beforehand, like Uncle would have, like that's some stuff that'll wow players. Yeah. Like I've only rarely had scenarios where that's happened, and every single time that's been pulled off against me as a player. If I survive, I'm like, wow, this is really... Look at this. They have a little system. They have little tunnels and things like that.
Well, and the cool thing is, even if the players figure it out before it happens, they can still they're still impressed by the, like, whoa, this guy's thought of everything. Like, they'll still sort of get a similar type of reaction, even if they don't fall into the trap. So I think that's the other thing. You have to allow for the trap not to happen if the players legitimately circumvent it or... don't do you know what I mean? Like you can't just say, okay, this cool situation is going to happen no matter what. The situation should only happen if the players allow it to happen because they're not on their toes, do you know what I mean? That's another thing to consider is kind of fairly applying whatever traps like that you have in play. Giving the players a fair shot to maybe detect it beforehand in some way.
You can't get wed to how you want something to manifest in the game. It's gonna be whatever it is whenever it shows up. Like, so maybe it's not a trap. Maybe this is an opportunity for your players to be clever and circumvent the trap. And then Uncle's all like boasting about how he's got an army, and then like just nothing but corpses in there, and so he's like, uh-oh. That's wonderful. You can have that happen too. That's also a cool, fun thing that happens, and it happens for the same reason. So yeah, I think it's really easy, especially as an experienced GM, to be like, oh, but there's supposed to be a trap here. Well, right, there is, but your players were clever, and instead they get a big reward. Yeah. That's fun, That's also something that was fun that you added to the game. So just relax. It doesn't have to be the thing you thought it was going to be.
No, I think that's the way to do it. That's definitely, but this is the approach I take. But again, I think the thing that you can really get from this movie is just this is a very good example of an intelligent villain, and that's the way to make it happen. I also think that it's a really good example of infighting and how the martial world might work in a wuxia setting, and how you can make that interesting. And you could really base a whole campaign off of what's going on here. You could in fact, I've done something like that. You can very easily take the starting point of this movie and have that be the backdrop of a really interesting sort of sect war campaign.
Yeah, you could just slot your own characters in here, and it would work great. Yeah. So that's another one of the things. Like, the actual political situation that's set up in the movie is very gameable, and especially when it comes to martial world stuff. You have all the great ingredients. You have the kind of forbidden love story. You've got the rivalries. You've got all these conflicting loyalties. You've got an assassination plot. All great stuff, and you get these larger-than-life personalities who are trying to juggle all of this stuff. That's wuxia in a nutshell. And that's, going back to whenever you're talking about how wuxia as a genre isn't quite as nailed down and defined as people like to pretend it is, this is a movie that, will challenge you to think, well, this is wuxia, but how is this wuxia when it's so different than what I'm used to with wuxia? Yeah. That's great. That's wonderful.
And it challenges one of the core things about wuxia. It really sort of is I think it's a particularly interesting movie for that reason, interesting book for that reason. That it's just I think, and also the other reason I like it is it shows sort of the smooth cross-cultural influences that are going on. A lot of times people are like, I'm going to make this as purely Chinese as I can. And it's important to remember that a lot of the writers weren't trying to do that. Gulong was borrowing from, other sources that he found interesting, and one of them was The Godfather. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, because I think that's something that allows you to keep breathing life into it, so that you're not just repeating, the same notes over and over and over again. Do you know what I mean? It can have the effect of, well, I'm always playing the melodic minor scale in music. Do you know what I mean? It's nice to throw in other flavors, and you can still and I'll go to continue with the music analogy. You can still have minor keyed music that incorporates other modes and other scales, and it'll be more interesting. And so I think that's kind of what you see here. So
the cultural cross-pollination, as I've been referring to it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that people and gamers are exceptionally susceptible to this, where we'll make these little rules about things, and we adhere to them despite the fact they're clearly injuring our fun. That's one of the things, that kind of hyper... I want to call it anal retentive focus on it being pure wuxia or purely Chinese cultural or whatever. It's fine if you want that to be a major influence even, or even ubiquitous influence, but even Chinese authors don't do that. Yeah. Much like every author on the planet, they grab from whatever they can get.
Yeah.
You know, and so you see like Greek mythology show up in Japanese cartoons and stuff like that, and it's to the benefit of the work. So don't get too obsessed with your self-imposed rules. Like, you know, relax a little bit and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and that's not to say you should ignore the the source material. It's just to say that the source material itself is, again, and I think Gulong is one of the better examples of this. He is, reaching out to other sources for inspiration, and it shows. You can see it. That's why a lot of these Choyuen movies that are based on his works have occasionally they'll have like a noir vibe, or like a they just have a feel that you can sort of see other genres sort of making their way into it, and it ends up being a really the end product ends up being really good. So and again, this is based on The Godfather, but I think if most people watch it the first time, they won't necessarily see that unless it's pointed out to them, or unless they're very familiar with The Godfather. So it does, even though it's based on it, it's its own thing. It's not. There are definitely things in this that reflect The Godfather, and there are even characters that feel just like characters pulled out of The Godfather. But the context of it is so different that it's a totally new experience.
It is. It is very much a new experience. Like, I wouldn't. This is like The Godfather in that it has like a tonally things that are very similar, structurally, character-wise, but it's so unique. Yeah. It's so much its own thing, and it's so good in its own merit. Even if you don't like compare it to The Godfather, it's just on its own. It's such a fantastic work. So like, you're right. Like, I wouldn't. You pointed out The Godfather similarity to me, and I was like, oh, you're right. It does get, but you're right. I wouldn't have seen that, and I still would have greatly enjoyed the movie without that comparison.
No, well, and it's also, I mean, and of course, The Godfather is not based on nothing either. The Godfather, has its roots in, like the stories of the, I think the Archangel Michael, and in these kinds of stories, and so but what this reminds me of is like when you see a movie that's based on a Shakespeare play but ported into but not where they've taken like the actual dialogue, just where they've taken like the story.
Like Things I Hate About You is a good example of that.
Yeah, they ported it into a new setting, and it ends up being really interesting because the underlying structure works, but it does something different when you put it into a different environment, a different scenario with different characters. So I think, I mean, again, I wouldn't use the word he ripped off The Godfather here. I have seen people say that. I don't think that this is ripping off The Godfather. I think this is he found very new and interesting uses for The Godfather. And so I don't know. That's do you have anything else to add on top of what we've said, or is that have we given a pretty good breakdown of Killer Klans?
That is a pretty decent breakdown. Like, I sort of feel like we went backwards talking about Killer Klans. Like, I feel like we started with the end and worked forward.
Yeah.
But, again, nothing wrong with that. So, no, I mean, like, it was really good. I think that's a good breakdown.
Okay, and here's what I would say to the audience is Killer Klans is available on Amazon Prime. So if you have Amazon Prime, definitely check it out. Because this is, again, I not everybody's going to share my taste, but this is one of my favorite wuxia films, and I think that it's really worth just taking a look at. It's old school, so it's not, so prepare for a little bit of confusion when you first see it, because there are a lot of characters and beats. I think you used the word dense, right? You said it was a dense movie.
Yes, it's very dense. Like, if as just a pure movie review, not looking at it like a game thing, I would say it is a very dense and very sophisticated and very grim movie that's very much worth your time to, like, it's worth it to unpack it and to examine it, and just for not just for its novelty, but just for how wonderfully rich it is. Yeah. Like a chocolate cake. It's a very, very complex flavor, very bitter.
So hopefully we can get more people to watch Killer Klans, and also you can go to SBCnet and read like the first 9 chapters or whatever of the book if you want. You'll be disappointed because you won't be able to finish it, but it can give you some insight into what's going on.
If it's popular enough, maybe they'll finish the translation. That'd be great.
Well, I think the translation that's there has not been updated for about 5 years or something. So I think that the hopes are pretty low. Though I don't know. Maybe this podcast will, if the translator's listening, like please finish translating this book, because I really
please.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the chapters that we had, and but yeah, I mean, unfortunately with wuxia, you don't always get number one, you don't always get complete translations. You very rarely get official translations, and so you have to just go and find what you can. But I think it's also kind of cool because you really sort of have to work. You find the scraps that you can find, and you make use of it. It's like if you can only get 2 chapters of a book, well, you really, you can chew on those 2 chapters for a long time. So,
this is something wonderfully guerrilla about it, and like it feels kind of in genre to find scraps of an ancient manuscript.
Yeah,
only have a partial translation.
So we'll let everybody go. We'll be back on with some more movies and some more discussion. And also this Friday we're going to be doing Tai Chi Master on Wuxia Weekend, and we're also going to be doing Cobra Kai on Saturday. We decided to, people might have forgotten this, but we did the Karate Kid movies 1 through 3 last year, and we're trying to assemble the same team to talk about Cobra Kai. And we also have an Iron Triangle special coming out later in the week, which me and Lady Chow Fung did, where we took 5 Iron Triangle movies and just talked about them. So we will be back on, and we will talk to you later.